Her stepmother made her a servant, until a wealthy man from the city took her to give her a good life. She woke up to the sound of roosters crowing, their sharp calls cutting through the early morning mist that clung to the village. The small, worn-out house she lived in stood at the edge of the dusty road, its walls leaning slightly as if weary from years of neglect. Inside, the cold floor made her shiver as she stepped out of the thin blanket she had clutched tightly all night. Her small hands, calloused from constant chores, trembled slightly from the chill, but she did not complain. She never complained. She had learned long ago that complaining only brought more trouble. Her father had died when she was just a little girl. She barely remembered his warm smile or the way he would lift her onto his shoulders, letting her feel the world from above. Those memories were like small flickers of light in her heart, moments she clung to when life became too heavy. Her mother had passed away before she could even remember, leaving her with her stepmother, a woman who seemed to find joy only in giving her more work, more rules, and more harsh words. The stepmother's voice echoed through the small house as the girl entered the kitchen. "Get moving, there's no time to waste. The floors won't scrub themselves and the fire won't light on its own." It was not a shout, not entirely. It was sharper than that, cutting into her spirit like a cold wind. The girl did not respond. She had learned that silence was safer than words in that house. She tied her thin hair back with a piece of string and picked up the broom, her small frame barely able to reach some corners of the dusty floor. Her days were filled with chores from dawn until dusk. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washed clothes by the stream, tended to the small garden, and cooked whatever food the stepmother deemed acceptable. The stepmother watched constantly, ready to find a mistake, ready to scold. If a plate was not perfectly polished, if the soup was a little too salty, if the clothes were not folded just so, the girl felt the sting of criticism. It was a life without rest, a life without kindness, but she endured it because she had no other choice. Despite the harshness, she found small moments of happiness wherever she could. Sometimes she would sneak to the little garden behind the house and pick a wildflower, pressing it into her hand as if it were a treasure. Sometimes, when she fetched water from the stream, she would watch the sunlight sparkle on the surface, letting it warm her face for a brief moment. And sometimes, she would sit quietly in the evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, imagining a life beyond the narrow streets of her village, beyond the constant orders of her stepmother. She dreamed of a life where she could laugh freely, where her hands could be gentle and not calloused, where her heart could be light instead of heavy. School was a rare luxury she could only glimpse from afar. Sometimes she would watch other children walking to school, their bags swinging, their laughter filling the air. She remembered the few days she had been allowed to sit in a classroom, how wonderful it had felt to hold a book, to trace letters with her fingers, to imagine worlds far beyond the dusty village. But those days were few, and her stepmother often reminded her that studying was useless for a girl like her. "Your place is here, with the broom and the water," she would say. And so the girl learned to read in secret, stealing moments when her stepmother was busy, or when the house was silent, scribbling letters on scraps of paper she hid under her mattress. Her neighbors knew of her hardships, though few dared to intervene. Some offered small kindnesses, a piece of bread, a warm smile, a kind word, but the stepmother's sharp eyes watched them as well. Any gesture of comfort was brief, fleeting, and often had to be hidden. Yet these small acts reminded her that the world outside her home could be kind, even if her own home was not. They became her quiet sources of strength, whispers of hope she clung to during the long, exhausting days. Her stepmother did not stop at work. She found other ways to humiliate the girl, to remind her of her place. She would call her lazy or useless, even when the girl had worked tirelessly from dawn. She would give her the smallest scraps of food while eating the best herself. She would force her to wear tattered clothes while her own daughters wore new, bright dresses. The girl endured all this without complaint, though her heart often ached with sadness. She learned to swallow her tears, to keep her eyes down, to move quickly and quietly, as if her very existence depended on her silence. Yet in the midst of all this, the girl's spirit was not broken. She had a quiet strength, a gentle determination that refused to fade. She found ways to bring small joys into her day. Sometimes she would whistle softly while sweeping the floor. Sometimes she would hum a tune she remembered from her father. And sometimes, when the night was calm and the stars were bright, she would lie on the roof, feeling the cool wind against her face, and imagine a life that was hers, a life where she could be free and happy. These moments were brief, fragile, but they were hers, and she treasured them fiercely. Even in her hardest moments, she found ways to help others. When a neighbor fell ill, she would sneak over with a warm bowl of soup or a small piece of bread. When a younger child cried because they were hungry, she would quietly share her own meager portion. These acts of kindness were never recognized, and yet she continued, because she believed deep in her heart that goodness mattered, even if it went unnoticed. It was this kindness, this gentle strength, that made her different, that made her shine even in the shadow of her stepmother's cruelty. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, her small body curled tightly against the thin blanket. She thought of what life could be like, of a world where people were kind, where she could rest, where she could learn and grow. She imagined a house filled with warmth, laughter, and love, things she had only seen in fleeting glimpses, in the smiles of neighbors or the pages of a borrowed book. These dreams kept her going, gave her a reason to wake up each day and face the endless chores, the harsh words, and the loneliness. Her stepmother sometimes tried to crush these dreams. She would say things like, "You will never be more than a servant," or "No one will ever care for a girl like you." But the girl held onto her small flickers of hope. She knew that somewhere out there, beyond the dusty village roads and the small, worn-out house, there might be a life that was different, a life that was kinder, a life that could be hers if she could only reach it. She often wondered why her father had to leave so soon, why her mother could not have stayed, why her stepmother could not be different. But she never let these questions weigh her down for too long. Instead, she focused on what she could control: her work, her small acts of kindness, her secret studies, and her dreams. She understood that her life was hard, but she also understood that she was not powerless. She could endure, she could survive, and she could hope. In the quiet moments, when she swept the floors or washed the dishes, she would imagine a brighter future. She would imagine herself dressed in clean, beautiful clothes, walking through the streets with confidence. She would imagine herself learning new things, speaking to people who valued her thoughts and ideas. She would imagine herself laughing freely, without fear of scolding or judgment. These thoughts were like tiny seeds planted in her heart, growing slowly, quietly, but surely, ready to bloom when the right time came. And so, day after day, she continued her work, enduring the harsh words, the endless chores, and the loneliness. But she did so with a quiet determination, a gentle hope, and a kindness that refused to fade. Though the world around her seemed harsh and unfair, she held onto her dreams, knowing that one day her life could change. She did not know how or when, but she believed that she deserved more, that she was capable of more, and that one day the world might finally see the goodness and strength that had lived in her all along. Even when the night came, and the stars shone cold and distant, she would lie awake for a while, listening to the sounds of the village settling down. She would remember the small kindnesses she had received, the fleeting moments of beauty she had noticed in her harsh world, and she would imagine a future filled with warmth, safety, and love. And in those quiet moments she felt a spark, a small flame of hope that no one, not even her cruel stepmother, could extinguish. Life for the girl continued in the same relentless rhythm. Each day seemed to merge into the next, filled with chores, scolding, and exhaustion. Her stepmother's expectations were endless, and her own desires had little room to breathe. The mornings began before the sun rose, when the chill in the air made her fingers numb as she scrubbed the floors and prepared the household for the day. By the time the sun climbed high into the sky, her arms ached from washing, her feet hurt from standing for hours, and her back was stiff from bending and sweeping. And yet she did not stop. She could not stop. She had no choice but to endure, to persevere, and to keep moving, even when her body protested and her heart felt heavy. Her stepmother was tireless in finding faults. No matter how carefully she cleaned or cooked, there was always something wrong. "You missed a spot," she would snap. "This soup is too salty and you burned the bread again." Every mistake, even the smallest one, was met with sharp words or harsh gestures. Sometimes the girl would feel a sudden fear rising in her chest, her stomach tightening, as though it were warning her of punishment to come. Other times she would feel a cold sadness, the kind that sinks deep into the bones, when she realized she could never meet her stepmother's impossible standards. Still, she kept working. She had learned that quiet obedience was safer than arguing, and silence could shield her from more harm. Despite the cruelty, she found small ways to make life bearable. She learned to move quickly, almost gracefully, through the endless tasks, finding moments to pause and breathe when no one was looking. She would hum softly to herself while scrubbing the floors, creating tiny islands of peace in the sea of demands. Sometimes she would sneak into the garden behind the house, kneeling among the weeds and wildflowers, her hands touching the soft petals and the rich soil. These moments, though brief, were her escape. They reminded her that beauty and life could exist even in the harshest conditions, and they gave her a quiet strength that no one could take away. School remained a distant dream, almost like a story from another world. The few times she had attended lessons in her early years were magical, and she remembered them with longing. The sound of the teacher's voice, the feeling of a pencil in her hand, and the thrill of learning something new filled her with joy she could scarcely describe. But her stepmother had no interest in letting her grow in knowledge. "Books are for rich girls," she would say. "Your place is here, cleaning, cooking, and obeying." And so she studied in secret whenever she could. She would borrow scraps of paper and old pencils, hiding them under her mattress, and copy letters and numbers, teaching herself to read and write whenever the house was quiet. These secret lessons became her sanctuary, a place where her mind could stretch beyond the small, dusty walls of her home. Neighbors sometimes watched her with quiet admiration, though few dared to interfere. They saw the way she worked tirelessly, the way she carried herself despite exhaustion, and the small kindnesses she offered to others. When a neighbor was sick, she would sneak over with a small bowl of soup or a bundle of clean clothes, never asking for thanks or recognition. When children played in the streets, she would sometimes pause to watch, smiling quietly at their laughter, even though she could not join them. These moments of connection, though rare, were like droplets of water in a desert, giving her the nourishment of hope and reminding her that there was a world beyond her suffering. Her stepmother, however, seemed determined to crush any spark of joy or independence. She would give her the smallest scraps of food while her own daughters ate well. She would make her wear tattered clothes and then scold her for looking dirty or unattractive. She would compare her unfavorably to other children, making her feel small and unworthy. And yet the girl endured. She learned to accept harsh words without showing pain, to hide her tears when no one was looking, and to find strength in small victories. Each day she survived, each day she persevered, became a quiet triumph of courage and endurance. Even within this life of hardship, there were moments that reminded her of her own worth. Occasionally, someone from the village, a kind neighbor, a passing traveler, or a friend from school, would notice her diligence and integrity. They would offer a smile, a word of encouragement, or a small gift. She treasured these moments, keeping them close in her heart like precious gems. They reminded her that she was more than the chores she performed, more than the scolding she endured, more than the limitations imposed upon her by her stepmother. She was capable of goodness, kindness, and intelligence, even if the world around her did not recognize it. The monotony of her life was occasionally broken by small adventures, though none were grand. Sometimes she would accompany her stepmother to the village market, carrying heavy baskets while enduring her sharp words. She would watch the people of the village, noticing the way they moved, the clothes they wore, the way they spoke to each other. She would imagine herself among them, dressed in simple but clean clothes, speaking freely and being treated with respect. These daydreams, though fleeting, gave her heart a lift, reminding her that life could be different, that a future beyond servitude was possible. She also found solace in nature. The stream near the village became a secret refuge where she could wash clothes and allow her mind to wander. She loved the way the water sparkled in the sunlight, how the leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and how the birds sang without concern for the hardships of the world. She would sometimes sit on a smooth stone by the stream, letting her feet dangle in the cool water, and imagine a life where she could be free, where her hands were not worn and tired from endless labor, where her heart was light instead of heavy. These quiet moments reminded her that life could hold beauty and that her dreams were not foolish or impossible. Her stepmother's cruelty was not limited to work. There were moments of humiliation that cut deeper than any labor. She would make the girl serve her guests first, ensuring she was ignored or treated poorly. She would call her names meant to sting, mocking her appearance, her intelligence, and her dreams. She would deny her even the smallest pleasures, taking away food, comfort, or rest as punishment for imagined slights. The girl bore it all silently, but inside she felt a quiet fire. She promised herself that one day her life would be different. She promised herself that one day she would be free. This promise, repeated silently every day, became a source of strength she carried through each challenge. In her quiet moments, she would remember her father's words, though they were few and faint in memory. He had always encouraged her curiosity, her kindness, and her strength, telling her that she was capable of great things. These memories became a lifeline, a reminder that she was not defined by her stepmother's cruelty, that she was more than a servant, and that she could rise above the harshness of her life. She carried his memory like a shield, protecting her heart from despair and giving her the courage to continue. Even as exhaustion and sadness threatened to overwhelm her, she found ways to keep hope alive. She would watch the stars at night, imagining that each one represented a possibility, a dream, or a future that awaited her. She would whisper to herself that her life could be different, that there were kind people in the world, that she was worthy of love and respect. These whispered promises, repeated in the stillness of night, became her mantra, her way of holding on to hope in a world that often seemed devoid of it. And so, day after day, the girl continued to endure, to work, and to dream. She moved through her chores with quiet determination, finding small moments of beauty and kindness wherever she could. She learned to read and write in secret, to carry herself with dignity even in the face of cruelty, and to imagine a life beyond the dusty village and the harsh hands of her stepmother. Her heart remained gentle, her spirit remained unbroken, and her hope remained alive. Though her life was filled with hardship, she began to understand that she was stronger than she realized. Each day she survived, each challenge she faced, each small act of kindness she offered strengthened her resolve. She knew that life could be difficult, unfair, and even cruel, but she also knew that she had the power to endure, to rise, and to dream. And in that quiet strength, in that gentle hope, lay the seed of a future that was waiting for her, a future filled with possibility, kindness, and the chance for a life she had always dreamed of. The village woke early as usual, but that day carried a sense of curiosity and excitement that was unusual for the dusty streets and quiet houses. Rumors had spread that a wealthy man from the city was visiting, someone important and respected, traveling through to see the lands, meet people, and perhaps make arrangements for business or trade. The villagers spoke in hushed voices, wondering who he was, what he would look like, and whether he would take notice of anything beyond the usual routines of the village. Inside the small house at the edge of the village, the girl moved quietly, carrying out her morning chores. She had learned over the years to ignore the gossip and focus on the tasks before her, though she could not entirely escape the excitement in the air. Her stepmother was bustling about with unusual energy, preparing the house to appear presentable. She seemed eager to impress the visitor, thinking already of the praise or favor she might receive if everything went perfectly. The girl, meanwhile, kept her head down, sweeping the floors and washing dishes, as she had done countless times before. When the wealthy man arrived, the village seemed to pause. His carriage rolled along the dusty road, polished and elegant, its wheels leaving deep tracks in the earth. He stepped down with an air of calm authority, dressed in fine clothing that shimmered in the sunlight. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the surroundings with a quiet interest. He did not rush. He did not speak loudly. There was something about him that demanded attention without force, something about his presence that made the villagers stop and watch. The girl first noticed him while she was tending to the small garden behind the house. She had gone there to steal a few moments of peace before the stepmother called her back to work. She saw him from a distance, stepping carefully over the uneven path, speaking politely to a villager who approached him with questions. Something about the way he moved, the way he spoke, made her heart quicken. She had never seen anyone like him, someone who seemed so calm, yet so aware of everything around him. She paused, clutching the small flower she had been holding, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. Her stepmother immediately spotted the man as he approached the house. Her eyes glinted with greed and ambition. "This is our chance," she whispered to herself. "If I show him that we are capable and hardworking, perhaps he will reward me." She quickly ordered the girl inside, telling her to make the house spotless, to arrange everything perfectly, and to serve tea and food with impeccable manners. The girl obeyed silently, her hands moving quickly as she tried to fulfill every demand. She had learned that resistance only brought more trouble, and today she had no choice but to obey. When the wealthy man entered the house, he noticed the girl immediately. She was quietly moving through the rooms, carrying a tray of tea, her movements careful and precise. He observed her with interest, not in a harsh or judgmental way, but with a kind of curiosity that seemed to notice everything about her, the care in her movements, the way she avoided drawing attention to herself, the gentle way she handled the delicate tea cups. There was a light in her eyes, a quiet intelligence, and an air of dignity that he found remarkable. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her not as a servant, not as a girl to be ordered around, but as a person of value. She felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, fear, and disbelief. She had never been noticed in this way before. People had always seen only what she did, never who she was. Now, for the first time, she felt that her efforts, her care, her very presence mattered. The wealthy man spoke to her briefly, asking simple questions about the house, the village, and the work she did. His tone was polite and gentle, different from the sharp and commanding voice of her stepmother. She answered softly, carefully, but with honesty. She did not exaggerate or lie, because she had learned that truth, even when harsh, was the only thing she could hold on to. He seemed impressed by her answers, by her calm and thoughtful demeanor, and he made a mental note of her intelligence and kindness. Her stepmother, seeing the attention the girl received, became anxious. She whispered to the wealthy man about the girl's usefulness, praising her diligence and obedience in a way that felt forced and rehearsed. She hoped to appear as a generous and competent guardian while taking credit for the girl's talents. The man nodded politely, but it was clear that he was more interested in the girl herself than in her stepmother's words. He had a rare way of seeing people as they truly were, beyond appearances, beyond flattery, and beyond falsehoods. The girl, unaware of her stepmother's intentions, continued her tasks. She noticed the way the man watched her, not with judgment but with interest and respect. She felt a warmth in her chest, a spark of hope that she had not allowed herself to feel before. For years, she had lived in the shadow of cruelty and neglect, but now someone had noticed her for who she truly was. It was a feeling she could hardly believe, yet it filled her with a sense of possibility she had never known. During the day, the wealthy man observed more of her actions. He saw her kindness when she offered water to a tired animal outside, her patience when she explained something to a small child who had wandered into the yard, and her quiet perseverance when she returned to chores despite exhaustion. Each small act impressed him further. He could see that she possessed not only skill but heart, not only intelligence but empathy, qualities that were rare and valuable in any world, whether in the city or the village. At some point, the wealthy man spoke privately with a few villagers, asking about the girl's life, her family, and her circumstances. They told him of her father's death, her mother's passing, and the stepmother's harsh treatment. They spoke of her diligence, her kindness, and her courage, painting a picture of a girl who had endured far more than most her age. The man listened carefully, nodding, his expression thoughtful. He did not speak harshly of her stepmother, nor did he react with anger or judgment. Instead, he seemed to consider deeply what could be done to help the girl, to give her a life that matched her worth. By the afternoon, it was clear that the man had made a decision. He asked to speak to the girl privately, away from the house and the stepmother's watchful eyes. When she entered the small room where he waited, he spoke gently, encouragingly. "I have seen the way you work, the way you care for others, and the strength you carry within you," he said. "You have faced many challenges, and yet you remain kind and determined. That is a rare and precious gift. I believe you deserve a chance at a better life." The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She had dreamed of freedom, of kindness, of a life where she could learn, grow, and be treated with respect, but she had never imagined that someone would notice her in this way. Her mind raced with questions and doubts, fear mingling with excitement. Could she trust him? Could life truly change so suddenly? And yet, a small, brave part of her whispered that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance she had hoped for in her quiet moments by the stream and in the garden. Her stepmother, seeing the interaction, grew anxious and tried to intervene. She demanded explanations, reminding the man of the girl's supposed obligations, her role as a servant, and her place in the household. But the man remained calm, polite, and firm. He explained that he wished to help the girl, to give her an opportunity for education, safety, and a life free from hardship. He did not seek to humiliate the stepmother, but he made it clear that the girl's future would not be bound by cruelty or neglect any longer. The girl felt a mixture of fear, hope, and gratitude as she listened. She realized that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. She would leave behind the small house, the endless chores, and the harsh words. She would leave behind the stepmother's control, the narrow streets of the village, and the life she had known for so long. In its place, there was the promise of education, kindness, and the chance to grow into the person she had always imagined herself to be. Before she left, the man offered her a small gift, a simple token, perhaps a piece of clothing or a book, that symbolized the new path she was about to take. It was not grand, but it was enough to make her heart swell with hope. She realized that life could be different, that her dreams were not foolish, and that her goodness and perseverance had been recognized. She felt a quiet pride, a sense of dignity, and a spark of courage that would carry her forward. As the carriage rolled out of the village, she glanced back at the small house, the dusty streets, and the garden she had tended so carefully. She did not feel anger or resentment, only a quiet farewell, a recognition that she was leaving behind hardship but also carrying with her the strength and lessons it had given her. She was ready for what lay ahead, ready to embrace the unknown, and ready to step into a future that promised kindness, opportunity, and a life that reflected her true worth. The city was unlike anything the girl had ever imagined. As the carriage rolled along the wide, bustling streets, she pressed her small hands against the seat, her eyes wide with wonder. Buildings rose taller than any tree she had ever seen, their walls gleaming in the sunlight, with windows reflecting the sky like mirrors. People hurried past on the sidewalks, dressed in clothes that sparkled with color and richness, speaking in voices that carried the energy and rhythm of a life far different from the quiet, dusty village she had left behind. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. Everything was new, unfamiliar, and overwhelming. She had never been outside her small village except for rare errands, and now she was surrounded by a world so vast, so alive, that she struggled to take it all in. The carriage stopped in front of a large, elegant house with tall doors and wide steps. The wealthy man led her inside, welcoming her with a gentle smile. She followed quietly, unsure of what awaited her, but trusting the man who had offered her a chance at a better life. Inside, the house was even more impressive. The floors shone like polished glass, the walls were painted in warm, inviting colors, and the furniture was both grand and comfortable. The girl could hardly believe her eyes. For the first time in her life, she stepped into a home that was filled with light and warmth, rather than shadows and harsh words. The wealthy man guided her through the rooms, explaining the purpose of each space, and showing her the life she could have if she learned, adapted, and worked alongside him. At first, the girl felt lost. She had spent her life in a small, simple house where every corner and every task was familiar. Now, everything seemed so big, so complicated, so overwhelming. The rooms were filled with objects she had never seen before. The people who worked in the house moved quickly and spoke in ways she did not fully understand, and the expectations were different. She worried that she would make mistakes, that she would be clumsy, or that she would disappoint the man who had shown her kindness. Yet she remembered the lessons of her past, the patience she had learned, the quiet perseverance, and the courage to face hardships, and she resolved to do her best. The wealthy man treated her with patience and respect. He explained that learning a new way of life would take time, and that mistakes were a part of growth. He introduced her to teachers, tutors, and helpers who would guide her, and he encouraged her to ask questions whenever she needed help. For the first time, she experienced education not as a forbidden luxury, but as a tool to grow, to expand her mind, and to build a future. She began attending lessons on reading, writing, mathematics, and practical skills, discovering abilities within herself that she had never known existed. Adjusting to city life was not easy. The rules, the people, and the routines were different from the village. She sometimes felt small and unsure, missing the familiar paths of her home and the quiet garden behind her old house. There were moments of frustration when she could not understand a lesson, or when she struggled with tasks that seemed simple to others. Yet she remembered her father's words, the small flickers of hope she had carried through years of hardship, and the encouragement of the wealthy man. These thoughts gave her courage to continue, to learn, and to persevere. Her appearance also changed, though slowly. She received clothes that were clean, well-made, and comfortable, a stark contrast to the tattered garments she had worn for so many years. She learned to carry herself with confidence, to speak clearly, and to take pride in her appearance without arrogance. Each small step of improvement, each new skill she mastered, became a victory. She began to feel a sense of pride in herself, something she had never experienced before, and it gave her the strength to face the challenges ahead. The wealthy man continued to observe her quietly, offering guidance and encouragement when needed, but never forcing or pressuring her. He recognized her potential, but he also understood the fragility of her beginnings. He knew that a sudden change could overwhelm her, so he moved slowly, allowing her to grow at her own pace. His trust in her abilities and his gentle support made her believe in herself in ways she had never imagined. She realized that she could succeed, that she could learn, and that she could thrive in this new environment. At the same time, the girl began forming relationships with others in the house. She met the staff, who treated her with curiosity at first, and then with respect as they saw her work ethic and kindness. She found friends among the other children in the neighborhood or in the school she attended, who were patient and willing to help her adjust. Slowly, she learned to communicate, to laugh, and to participate in a life that had once seemed impossible. These connections, small though they were, became an essential part of her new life, giving her a sense of belonging and acceptance that she had never known. Despite the many positive changes, she occasionally felt the weight of her past. Memories of her stepmother's cruelty, the long days of chores, and the moments of loneliness in her village would surface unexpectedly. Sometimes, when she faced difficulties in her lessons or felt out of place among the city children, she would remember the dusty streets of her old home and the garden she had loved. Yet these memories no longer brought despair. Instead, they reminded her of how far she had come, how resilient she had been, and how strong her spirit truly was. Over time, she began to thrive. Her reading and writing improved dramatically, and she discovered talents in drawing, sewing, and organizing that she had never fully explored. The wealthy man noticed these abilities and encouraged her to use them, giving her small projects and responsibilities that built her confidence. She began to take pride in her work, feeling a sense of accomplishment that was entirely new. For the first time, she understood that effort could lead to recognition, that skill could bring respect, and that her life could be shaped by her own hands rather than imposed hardships. She also developed a sense of independence. She learned to make decisions, to solve problems, and to navigate the complexities of city life. These lessons were not easy, and she often faced challenges that tested her patience, courage, and intelligence. But each challenge she overcame strengthened her, preparing her for an even brighter future. The girl realized that she was no longer the timid, fearful child from the village. She was becoming someone capable, someone resilient, and someone deserving of all the opportunities she had been given. The wealthy man remained a steady presence, offering advice and encouragement without taking control of her life. He celebrated her successes and guided her through difficulties, always reminding her that her worth was not determined by her past, but by her actions, character, and heart. She grew to respect him deeply, not only for the life he had given her, but for the kindness, patience, and wisdom he demonstrated every day. His example taught her that true strength came from compassion, understanding, and integrity. As months passed, the girl began to see a new world open before her. She could explore streets filled with shops and markets, meet people from different walks of life, and participate in activities she had only dreamed of. She learned to enjoy music, art, and literature, discovering a sense of joy and fulfillment that had been absent from her childhood. Her days were still busy, filled with study and work, but they were now balanced with moments of creativity, laughter, and growth. Life had become rich in possibilities, and she embraced each day with enthusiasm and gratitude. Her transformation was not only external but internal. The girl who had once been timid, fearful, and constrained by her stepmother's cruelty had grown into a young woman of confidence, intelligence, and compassion. She no longer doubted her abilities or her worth. She carried herself with dignity, treated others with kindness, and approached challenges with courage. Her past had shaped her resilience, her hardships had forged her determination, and her experiences in the city had nurtured her talents and spirit. Through it all, she remained humble and grateful. She never forgot the struggles of her early life, nor the quiet moments of hope that had sustained her in the village. She remembered the kindness of neighbors, the lessons she had taught herself in secret, and the small joys that had made life bearable. These memories grounded her, reminding her of the value of perseverance, patience, and empathy. She knew that her journey was extraordinary not because of luck alone, but because of her own strength and character. By the time she fully settled into city life, she had achieved a remarkable balance. She had learned to navigate the demands of her new environment, to pursue education, to build meaningful relationships, and to develop skills that would serve her for a lifetime. She had transformed from a timid village girl into a confident young woman, ready to embrace the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead. And through it all, she had never lost the gentle kindness, quiet strength, and hopeful spirit that had defined her from the very beginning. Her journey in the city was far from easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but she faced them with courage, determination, and grace. Each day was a step toward the life she had always dreamed of, a life filled with learning, growth, and the freedom to be herself. And in her heart, she carried the quiet knowledge that no matter what obstacles remained, she had already overcome more than many, and that her future would be shaped by her resilience, her kindness, and the hope that had never left her side. The girl's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. She no longer woke up to the harsh calls of her stepmother, no longer scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, no longer lived in fear of scolding or punishment. Instead, she woke in a warm, sunlit room, her soft bed comfortable, her surroundings full of light and warmth. Every morning brought new possibilities, new lessons, and new opportunities. The world that had once seemed so distant and impossible had become her reality, and she embraced it with gratitude and determination. Despite the comfort of her new life, she never forgot the hardships that had shaped her. Each struggle, each moment of fear, each act of perseverance had prepared her for this new chapter. She carried the lessons of patience, diligence, and resilience wherever she went, knowing that her journey had not been easy, and that her past was a source of strength rather than shame. Her experiences in the village had taught her the value of kindness, empathy, and humility, qualities that now set her apart in her new environment. The wealthy man from the city continued to guide her, offering wisdom, encouragement, and gentle support. He never demanded perfection, but he challenged her to grow, to think independently, and to embrace her potential. He celebrated her successes, no matter how small, and he helped her navigate the challenges of city life with patience and care. Through his mentorship, she began to understand the power of opportunity combined with hard work, and she learned that her life could be shaped by her choices, talents, and determination. She also began to develop her own passions and skills. She studied diligently, mastering subjects that had once seemed impossible. She explored literature, discovering the beauty of words and stories that opened her mind to new worlds. She practiced sewing, drawing, and other crafts, honing her abilities and taking pride in the creations she produced. Each accomplishment, each new skill learned became a source of confidence and joy. For the first time, she understood that she was capable of achieving far more than she had ever imagined. As she grew more confident, she began to connect with others in meaningful ways. She made friends who valued her thoughts and presence, who admired her resilience and kindness. She helped those in need, drawing on the empathy she had developed during her difficult early years. She tutored children who struggled with learning, offered assistance to neighbors, and participated in community activities that enriched both her life and the lives of others. Her actions reflected the heart of the girl she had always been, compassionate, hardworking, and determined to make the world a better place. Her stepmother, by contrast, faded further into the background of her life. The girl thought of her only occasionally, recalling the cruelty she had endured, but she no longer carried anger or fear. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her own life had transformed and that she was no longer bound by the harshness of the past. She realized that the stepmother's power had always been limited to fear and control, and that true strength came from character, kindness, and perseverance, the very qualities she had nurtured through her hardships. The girl's journey also brought recognition and admiration. People noticed her intelligence, her skills, and her kindness. Teachers praised her dedication and growth, friends valued her honesty and warmth, and neighbors respected her helpfulness and integrity. She had become a young woman who inspired others, not through wealth or status, but through the quiet strength of her character and the genuine goodness of her heart. She had transformed her life not through luck alone, but through courage, determination, and unwavering hope. With each passing day, she grew more independent and self-assured. She learned to make thoughtful decisions, to navigate challenges with wisdom, and to take pride in her accomplishments. She no longer feared failure or judgment, for she understood that setbacks were part of growth, and that persistence and effort could overcome almost any obstacle. She carried herself with dignity, spoke with confidence, and treated others with respect, reflecting the values she had cultivated through years of struggle and opportunity. The wealthy man watched her transformation with quiet pride. He had recognized her potential from the beginning, but he marveled at the courage, resilience, and integrity she had shown. He knew that her success was not just the result of his guidance, but of her own determination and heart. He continued to support her, offering advice, opportunities, and encouragement, but always allowing her to take ownership of her journey. In this way, he helped her become not only educated and skilled, but also wise, compassionate, and self-reliant. The girl also began to consider the future she wanted to build. She dreamed of contributing to society, helping others who faced hardship, and creating opportunities for those who lacked guidance and support. She thought of the children she had tutored, the neighbors she had helped, and the community she had grown to love. She realized that her own experiences had prepared her to make a difference, and she felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had once seemed impossible. Her life became a balance of work, study, creativity, and giving back. She continued to learn and grow, embracing every challenge with curiosity and determination. She explored new hobbies, developed new skills, and strengthened relationships with those around her. Through all of this, she maintained the humility and kindness that had defined her from the beginning. She had achieved comfort, opportunity, and recognition, but she never forgot the values and lessons that had carried her through hardship. Over time, she began to reflect on her journey with a sense of awe and gratitude. She remembered the long days of chores, the harsh words of her stepmother, and the moments of loneliness and fear in the village. She also remembered the small acts of kindness, the quiet support of neighbors, and the dreams that had sustained her. She understood that each experience had shaped her into the person she had become, a person capable of resilience, empathy, intelligence, and courage. She realized that her life had been transformed not only by the wealthy man's generosity, but also by her own perseverance and determination. She had faced every challenge with courage, learned from every difficulty, and embraced every opportunity with gratitude and effort. Her journey was a testament to the power of hope, hard work, and kindness. She had proven to herself and to the world that a life of hardship did not define a person's potential, and that resilience and goodness could create a future filled with opportunity, respect, and fulfillment. The girl's transformation inspired others as well. Her story became known among the community, encouraging young people who face difficulties to persevere and remain hopeful. Parents and neighbors spoke of her courage and dedication, of the way she had turned her life around, and of the kindness she continued to show despite her own past struggles. She became a symbol of hope, a living example that determination, integrity, and compassion could overcome even the most challenging circumstances. As she grew into adulthood, the girl embraced her new life fully. She continued to pursue education, skill building, and personal growth, always striving to become the best version of herself. She nurtured relationships, valued community, and remained humble and grateful for every opportunity she had been given. The hardships of her past became distant memories, not sources of pain but reminders of her strength and resilience. She had turned adversity into wisdom, struggle into skill, and suffering into compassion. Finally, she reached a point in her life where she could look back on her journey with pride. She had risen from a life of servitude and neglect to a life of opportunity, learning, and respect. She had developed talents, formed meaningful relationships, and embraced a future filled with possibilities. She had proven that one's beginnings do not determine one's destiny, and that courage, perseverance, and goodness can create a life of fulfillment and impact. Her heart remained gentle, her spirit resilient, and her mind open. She carried her experiences with her as a source of strength, wisdom, and empathy. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that she was ready for anything, ready to face new challenges, embrace new opportunities, and continue to grow into the person she had always dreamed of becoming. She had finally achieved the life she had longed for, a life filled with respect, love, and purpose, and she knew that every hardship she had endured had led her to this moment of triumph and fulfillment. Her story became a testament to hope, resilience, and the power of opportunity combined with courage. It was a story that showed that even in the darkest of circumstances, a spark of kindness, determination, and belief in oneself could illuminate the path to a better life. She had transformed not only her circumstances but herself, becoming a person of strength, wisdom, and compassion, a young woman whose journey inspired and uplifted everyone who heard it.